videos where you like record my face and then put it on.
This is a verbal waiver.
Anyways, the point I was trying to make was, where's George?
George, she's helping
George of the Jungle.
George of the Jungle, yeah, exactly. All right, couple of things I need to talk to you about. Look, there is a problem with my approach. There is. See, usually when you set up your shop, if you're an auto teacher, usually when you set up your shop, you try to set it up so you don't have to worry about any cars getting broken, because after all, students break things. That's just the way it is. So you try to set up your shop with a variety of vehicles that the students can work on, to where if they strip a bolt or if they break something, it's not going to be a crisis. However, the problem is you don't get that much of a variety of work to do. Also, the students don't tend to be so highly motivated, because after all, they know that they're basically, it's like the difference between operating on a live person and operating on a cadaver, right? What's a cadaver?
Dead body.
Dead body is correct. How do you say it in Spanish? Cadaver? Cadaver?
Oh, that's what it is? I didn't know that.
Okay, so my point was that the way we have been operating is maximum risk. It really is. It's maximum risk, because we're actually dealing with people's real cars. And not only are we dealing with people's real cars, but for the most part, we're dealing with cars that these people need to leave tonight. So, I just wanted to make the point that so the point I was trying to make was, you may notice that when we're in the middle of a repair job and something gets broken, my anxiety level shoots up very, very high, very, very quickly. And the reason is because if the part that just got broken isn't readily available at this AutoZone here, you're going to have to go to some other AutoZone, or you're going to have to go to O'Reilly and blah, blah, blah. The problem is that most students, they don't realize that's the washer you were supposed to use. Oh, okay. That's even better. Okay, so most students don't recognize the potential for crisis. So as a result, they want to sit around and talk about Chivas and cars they wish they had the money for and blah blah blah. And that's because they don't realize that really. I have a little tip for you. Any of you guys coach any sports? Well, here's my little advice for you on coaching sports. If you got to tell your players this, if your plan for success requires the referees to get every call right, you don't have a plan for success. Get it? If you want to succeed on the field of play, you have to assume that the referees are going to blow half their calls, right? You have to make sure that the margin of victory is so high that even if the referees blow all their calls, you're still going to win. Get it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of people that say, oh, well, the ref robbed us of this game, right? The ref should have caught that foul. Well, refs never catch all the fouls, right? And chances are half of the fouls the refs don't catch were done by your team anyway. You ever play sports? You ever play sports? You play soccer? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, right? If you want to have a winning, if your game plan requires the referees to make every call perfectly, you don't have a winning plan. Get it? Yeah. And if your plan to fix cars, here's where I'm going with this. If your plan to fix cars requires everything to go perfectly for you, you're going to be in hot water a lot. Me, I can't take the stress anymore. So you know what I do? I plan to have a freaking disaster every time I work on a car. That way, 95% of the time, I'm pleasantly surprised. It's like a freaking miracle, right? Because usually bad things won't happen. Tonight, something very terrible happened. Potentially very terrible happened. So, my point was, you're going to notice my anxiety level goes up. And my anxiety level goes up until the problem has a solution in someone's hand. Because the simple fact of the matter is, that could have been very, very bad. If that had been the switch that turned on the cooling fan, especially on a Thursday night, if that had been the switch that turned on the cooling fan, we would have been in big trouble. Why?
Overheat.
Yeah, because it would overheat and the fan wouldn't come on. So, number one, we got lucky about that. So, it was the coolant temperature sensor. What does the coolant temperature sensor do?
Monitors the temperature of the car.
It senses the coolant temperature. Okay, why do we need to sense the coolant temperature?
What's it called again?
Coolant temperature sensor. Toyota calls that an ECT, engine coolant temperature sensor. OBD1. What year is OBD2?
96.
96. Yeah, now there are some 94s that are OBD2, but OBD2 was required by law starting 1996. OBD stands for what? OBD,
Onboard diagnostics.
Onboard diagnostics. What?
OBD1? What is it?
OBD1 was the first generation of onboard diagnostics, which is to say the computer monitoring the systems of the car. So, this is an OBD1 Toyota, and it had an ECT. ECT stands for what?
Engine coolant temperature.
Engine coolant temperature. And GM's had a CTS. What does that stand for?
Coolant temperature
Coolant
sensor.
temperature sensor, yeah. See, the problem was that every different manufacturer had their own name. So you'd have like 8 different manufacturers and they'd have 8 different names for the same sensor. That's no good. So, OBD2, all the manufacturers required to use the same name for the sensor that did the same thing. Engine coolant temperature is one of the sensors that is one of the data points that the OBD2 is required to provide to any generic scan tool. What's a generic scan tool?
Reads the codes of the computer.
Yeah, but what does generic mean?
Should work on any stuff.
That it works on any car. Right, so a Snap-on or OTC or a Genesis, anything like that, or my little Chinito.
Centec.
Yeah, Syntec. Yeah, a real nice one like a Syntec. My point was that the reason they brought this up is because stuff like the Hondas earlier, the Hondas, they wouldn't let any scan tool read that. Well, it was like more like the Mercedes and the BMWs and stuff like that. They wouldn't let any scan tool read it except one of the factory dealership scan tools. Why?
So they can make money
How?
by people taking the cars.
By forcing people to go to the dealers to get their car fixed. Yes. Now remember, and this is something you need to understand. Mid-80s, early 90s, manufacturers were refusing to let their vehicles pass data to a generic scan tool like a Snap-on or OTC or anything like that. Okay. Also, they were refusing to provide service information. So even if you could get this information on your scan tool, they wouldn't tell you what the readings were supposed to be. Why?
But the one that's back the dealer.
Force you to go to the dealer.
Now,
Okay,
you couldn't even buy a dealer too.
not really. And even if you could, it's like $6,000. Do you really work on enough Hondas to justify getting a Honda scan tool?
No.
No, so really the only people that were successful in working on Hondas were either Honda dealers or guys that were Honda technicians that somehow ended up with a scan tool. Because if you didn't have that scan tool, it was pretty much, well,
Keep
roll
the
the
check
dice,
engine
right?
on, right?
Okay, here's the most important part about that. Do you understand that the manufacturers were deliberately making it difficult to fix these cars? Yeah. So OBD2 came along, and OBD2 said that all the onboard diagnostic systems had to use the same connector. All the connectors had to be in the same place, and there had to be a minimum data set provided to each scan tool. What's a minimum data set?
Minimum information.
Yeah, minimum amount of information. I mean, they could give you more, but they couldn't give you any less than. Okay, what's you guys have got some experience on OBD2. What does every manufacturer give you on OBD2? What sensors does it give you? What sensor outputs does it give you? Oxygen sensor, good. Not only oxygen sensor, but each oxygen sensor. And the oxygen sensors behind the catalytic converters. Good. What else? Crankshaft position sensor. Yeah, well, if it has one, yeah. Camshaft position sensor. Ignition timing. Coolant temperature sensor. Intake air temperature sensor. Mass airflow sensor. MAP sensor. Injector pulse width. Fuel trim. Yeah, that's good enough. That's enough. So, they can give you more than this, and most manufacturers will, but they have to give you at least this. That was a requirement to sell cars in California, and since California is such a huge market, the manufacturers, you know, they couldn't ignore California, because, I mean, California sells so many cars, and it pretty much sets the standard for the whole country. So that was 1996. But here's the thing about that. If I went to the dealer, they have special scan tools, right? If I go to a Ford dealer, they're going to have Ford scan tools, right?
Right.
Okay. Is there going to be any difference between the Ford scan tool and the Snap-on?
Yes.
Huge difference. Huge difference, because the Ford scan tool is going to have certain tests programmed into it that the Snap-on can't do. It's going to have certain data coming out of it that the Snap-on won't have. It's going to have certain codes that only the manufacturer knows. Why? So that there will be some advantage to go into the factory, the dealer. Yeah? Now, here's the thing. For instance, if I take my Ford to the Ford dealer, he's going to be able to plug in a scan tool, and he's going to be able to tell, you know, individual injectors. He's going to be able to turn off individual injectors to test them for power balance. He's going to be able to do a power balance test without taking the spark plugs out. He's going to be able to do a dynamic compression test. He's going to be able to turn off the spark plugs one at a time. And as a result, there are significant advantages to taking your car to a dealer, as long as they got their act together. Problem is, you don't really want to know what the problem is, because I have a friend that just became a Ford salesman. You know what the real problem is? Everyone's got internet now. So now when they come into the dealership, they know exactly how much a car costs and exactly what the dealer's markup is. So it's like there's very rarely an opportunity to make a ton of money on selling a car. Everyone's pretty much stuck on the minimum. What, free market capitalism brings prices, competition brings prices down?
Wasn't Daryl saying that?
Yeah, I was shocked. I almost had a heart attack. Anyway, my point was, so the dealers are hardly making any money at all off the sales of the cars. Okay, so where do they make the money?
Service.
On service, right. Exactly. So as a result, there's a lot of motivation to replace stupid things. Now, remember I said that because we're going to talk about timing belts in a minute. But the problem with OBD1 was that every manufacturer had a different name for their sensors, and every manufacturer had a different code, because a code 24 on a Ford is a coolant temperature sensor code, ECT code, and a code 24 on a Toyota is an intake air temperature sensor code. That was a problem. So you had to be looking the stuff up all the time, and maybe, you know, because there was a while there where, bless you, There was a while there where if you got an Oldsmobile, it could have a Buick Pontiac motor and it could have a Chevy motor in it.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And the best part was they had two 3.8s, but they were different motors.
Yep.
Anyways. So OBD2 really made things much simpler. But one thing I gotta tell you is, in the era of OBD1, the manufacturers were deliberately making the cars hard to fix. Do you really want a car that the manufacturer made deliberately hard to fix?
No.
No, you really don't. You really don't. And I gotta tell you, at least the 80s cars, we were just getting started on computer controls. And usually in the primitive stages, you aren't doing it very well, right? I mean, when I went through auto school in 1981, 81 to 83. And it was right in the transition between carburetors and fuel injection.
Ooh.
We had OBD none. You know what OBD none meant?
Does all school
OBD none means there was no onboard diagnostics at all. Want me to tell you the truth? The OBD was invented by, in 1979 and a half, 80 and a half I think, was invented by General Motors. Because what happened was, with all these computer sensors and actuators, what happened was they got to the end of the line, the end of the assembly line, and the porter came, and he was supposed to drive the car out in the lot right after they finished manufacturing, right? So he jumps in the car, and he hits the key, and it goes, the car won't start. So they had to push the car out, right? And then the next car comes out, and the next car comes out, the next car comes out, and the porter comes out to the next car, sticks the key in the ignition, they had to push the car out. Why? Because it was early computer controls. These sensors went bad all the time, actuators went bad all the time, they really didn't understand what was going on, and they had no way of testing besides disconnecting every sensor and getting in there with a voltmeter. They had no other way of testing it. Which is why General Motors invented onboard diagnostics, and they called it ALDL. That's assembly line. Assembly line diagnostic link. Look, they didn't care that we couldn't fix these cars. Because what would happen is, if one of these sensors died, your car wouldn't start. And then the car would get pulled into your shop on a tow truck. How would you know why it didn't start? It could be a million things. Well, General Motors didn't care. Ford didn't care. Nobody cared. Good luck. Seriously. General Motors, 1980 and a half, comes out with the assembly line diagnostic link. You ever seen it? It's underneath the dashboard on the left-hand side. It's a square thing. The OBD1 GM connector.
Oh, I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. That was only put there by the factory for the factory technicians. They didn't care about us. Now, do you really want those kind of people making cars for you? Not really. And then, later, they're going to make it so they won't even give you service information? They're not your friends, right? And then they came after them with the Sherman Antitrust Act and said, this is how monopolies act, right? It's like when they broke up the phone company. There used to only be one phone company.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're old.
Then they broke it up into little baby bells.
Hey, much stuff.
Anyway, my point was that the 80s cars are primitive OBD systems, onboard diagnostic systems. They're primitive systems. They're also primitive computer controls, which means, you know, that was 25, 30 years ago, which means in the last 20 years, if there's a 1980s car that's still around, It's been hacked on hard because people tried to work on these cars without scan tools. Look, what's going to happen if you try to work on this car without a scan tool? You know, you're like Pescando, right? Right? When you throw your bait in the water, you don't know what fish you're going to catch, right? Which is why we end up with these cars that come in and, you know, you talk to the customer and they say, well, first you replace my spark plugs, then you replace my fuel injectors, then you replace my fuel pump, then you replace my computer. The guy's fishing, right? Doesn't make any sense. He doesn't even know if it's a fuel or a spark system problem.
Yes.
Yeah, he's just guessing. And then people will come in and do all these weird adjustments. Because there used to be a lot of adjustments on cars. And then they took all the adjustments away. Why did they take the adjustments away? Because they don't want you touching it. Because they know if you touch it, you'll probably screw it up. Yeah? So as a result, you get all these 80s cars. 80s cars are pretty much freaking junk. They just are. I can't think of an 80s car that I would want to own. And pretty much the same is true with most of your early 90s cars. The good thing is you can get an early 90s Corvette for like $4 or $5 grand. I forgot about that.
Yeah, about a 1984
Better
Pontiac Trans Am.
Nah.
1984 Pontiac Trans Am.
I would.
600.
I would.
6.5?
That's the early years of TBI, right?
It's a nice model. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the same engine you got in your Blazer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Blazer.
Oh shit. Yeah, I have the professional side.
What's that one?
It's running great.
Stiction? Okay.
No, it's not bad.
Automatic. In fact, it's got the exact same drivetrain, just in a smaller vehicle. You know, if you got an old one and it hasn't had 50,000 hands on it, it might be an okay vehicle, but it's not going to last very long, and it's going to tend to be expensive. I mean, look at what his friggin' hub. They wanted $250 for your hub, right?
I went to a Japanese mini truck.
That's 84 Nissan?
Yeah.
You
250
should know.
still.
What?
Yeah.
I'd rather get a Camino.
Yeah. It's hard to get parts for that stuff now. I mean, it was 25 years ago.
Yeah. Classic.
So, a lot of people say, oh man, this was a great car back in 1984. Yeah, it was. Leave it there. Okay. Now, we had, while we're on that topic, we had an interesting discovery today. Because there was a student I met, and the day I met him, which was like a week ago, he couldn't stop talking about all this money he wanted to pour into his truck and how bitching it was. And we got the thing going. Folks, have you noticed that when you bring a car in here, it all of a sudden transforms from kind of a joke to something that's nice and reliable and wonderful? Yeah. See, the thing is, your life is so dependent on cars that having a good running car is a significant portion of what it takes to have a good life. Really. Here it comes. Okay, so I'm in Claremont. You ever heard of Claremont?
Yeah.
Claremont is filled with people that went to grad school, so they think they know everything. And I was in Claremont buying a rifle, and in fact I was buying 2 rifles. I was in Claremont buying rifles, and this freaking hippie chick from Claremont comes up, old lady, and she says, oh, well, we should limit guns because if crazy people get guns, people can get killed. And I said, yeah, well, you know, if there weren't any cars, then drunk drivers couldn't kill anyone. You want to get rid of cars?
God. Stupid.
Well, no, see, because I finally figured it out that, you know, when people say stupid things and you don't say nothing because you want to be polite, they take it as agreement. So no more. People say stupid crap, I'm going to say something. That's my New Year's resolution. Anyway, my point was that stay away from 80s cars, because what we found out when we put this thing up on the, we were trying to perfect it, and what happened was when we put it up on the hoist, we found out that it had significant frame damage from a significant accident. See, that's what you want to do. You want to come in here and you want to do an inspection. You want to do a careful inspection, not so you can find out that your car is bitching, but so you can find out exactly where your car is. Yeah?
Yeah.
You know, because it's better to know, right? It's better to know. See, like kids, you may find out, if you look deeply into what your kid does all day, you might be very disappointed. But it's better to know, right?
Yeah.
Sad to say. May not make you happy, but it's better to know. In fact, some people might say it was your responsibility to know. So, anyways, you're going to find out there ain't too many cars that are 15 years old or 20 years old that are worth putting any significant amount of money into. My Explorer is only worth putting money into it because I already put in a ton of money to it, right? But that's because I worked at a school that had an auto shop, and I had them do all the work for free, so it worked out well. Okay, so let's talk about working on old cars. First of all, you ain't gonna get rich owning a shop that works on old cars. Why?
Nobody has
the
them.
money in.
Good. Anthony Green, best auto student I ever had, said that he realized that nobody wants to pay $1,300 to fix a car that they bought for $800. And it's true. Look, if you're going to do the work, changing the timing belt on a Mercedes is pretty much the same amount of work that changing the timing belt on a '84 Nissan is. Except Nissan has timing chain. Let's call it a Toyota. It's about the same amount of work, except one pays like 8 times as much. So, then you run into this thing where the hub on an old Nissan is more expensive than on a new
Chevy.
Ford. Yeah, Chevy, sure. All right. So basically, you're spending all your time, you know, it's like someone says, oh, there's something wrong with my car. So you take apart their car, and then they say, I don't have money to fix it, right? And the thing is, you can't just put this car back together in an unsafe condition and give it back to the customer. You would become liable. So, look, do yourself a favor. If you feed a stray dog, it's going to keep coming back, right? No matter how mean, gene, flea-ridden it is, right? If you're going to put all that money into a dog, get a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Now you want...
I see what you're talking about now.
Or a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, the interesting thing about that is there's really pretty women and there's ugly, nasty ones. And you would think that the ugly, nasty ones would be nicer to you than the pretty ones.
The ratchets.
That's not always true.
Yeah. New car.
And then you throw up your hands and say, why am I doing this?
I like ugly women.
You like ugly women?
Yeah, I heard that. So, let's talk about working on old cars. One of the biggest problems you're going to have is working on old cars. And what happened tonight, see, it's a shame, kind of. What happened tonight is not surprising. It's not unusual. It's not surprising nor unusual. Because what happens is the plastics that they were made of 30 years ago, 20 years ago, were not that good of a plastic. Which means if you breathe on it wrong, right? That's why when you look at the intake tube coming into your car, it's got duct tape on it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Because the plastics they used, the materials they were using, were just not that good. Now, what's the number one
Put a K and N.
enemy of rubber and plastic?
Heat.
Good. Heat. What else?
Cold.
Not really. Especially not around here.
Friction.
Air. Good. What else?
Rubber.
Grease.
Friction.
Good. Grease or oil. Absolutely. So, as a result, the longer a car's been around, the more likely it is to be exposed to all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may have seen like the old Fords of the mid-'80s and early '90s. They had hard vacuum lines. Now, you know most of the vacuum lines, for instance, the vacuum lines on his car are all made of rubber, right?
Yes.
Okay, what does rubber do in the presence of, if you get a lot of oil on it and just leave it on?
Well, build it.
Break.
It gets really soft and then it gets all crumbly, right? Yeah. Just telling you things you gotta watch out for with old cars. Well, these hard vacuum lines, Ford got tired of that, so what Ford wanted to do was they had little rubber ends on them, but then they were connected to these hard plastic tubes. Well, that's fine the first year, 5th year, 10th year. Come around the 11th year or something like that, if you bang into this tube, it goes. Now, you think AutoZone's going to carry that tube?
No.
Anyone know how to fix that?
Duct tape?
Duct tape and zip ties.
Here,
You can go
rubber,
half-piece.
hose.
I'll call Moses. No, just-
$20. I'll fix it. You said 20, right?
Jiffy Lube.
I don't think they do that.
Sleever with rubber hose.
Good.
Oh, I saw a video
Yeah,
on
that's what you
YouTube.
do.
Jiffy Lube.
You get a small rubber
Oh,
hose
but that guy who
about
drives
2
the
inches
car,
long,
oh, that fool's stupid.
They forgot to put
and
the
make it
oil.
long. You get a small rubber hose about 2 inches long, and you stick this into one end and you stick this into the other end. You might want to use some glue, but probably not, because you got to be careful, because if you get the glue on this part, it's going to clog it up. So you might want to put the glue here, the Permatex 2B here or there. Put it in a sleeve, probably be okay.
Mickey Mouse, right?
Pardon?
Mickey Mouse, kind of?
Not really.
Well, yeah, but kind of like.
Well, yeah, kind of, except for the fact that you really want to go to the dealer for this?
Nah.
You really think the customer's going to want to spend $40 on their $800 car?
Depends how is it.
Well, it depends how you define Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. See?
I look at
I'll
it this
just
way.
junk the freaking car.
Does this restore it to reliable function 100%?
No.
Yeah, it does. Then it's not Mickey Mouse. It's
Minnie Mouse.
yeah,
Minnie
it's
Mouse.
clever. Now tape.
Donald Duck.
I know lots of people that would tape this. Now,
No, that's it. The electrical tape.
is electrical tape going to give you a reliable, durable repair?
Duct
No
tape.
way. Never in a million years.
Duct tape works better.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that, because I introduced you to a new chemical today. And it's an extraordinarily valuable, useful chemical. It's called Permatex 2B. You better take notes on this, because this is a big secret.
Oh, what was that? Alright.
I've been using Permatex 2B for 35 years, and I have never ever had a failure with it. That's my endorsement. I've been using it 35 years, and I've never once had a failure with it. And there's hardly anything you can say that about. Seriously.
What do you use it for?
Permatex 2B is a sealer. And the reason you get 2B and not 1B is because it is non-hardening. You know, a lot of people use RTV, that silicone stuff. It's very, very rarely is that the right thing to use. And very much of your success in auto repair is going to be using the right chemicals.
Hey, so I can use that for the gaskets?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For pan gaskets, valve cover gaskets,
Intake?
thermostat housing gaskets, what?
Head gaskets?
How about
No.
intake?
No, head gaskets are modern head gaskets are going to have the chemical they're supposed to have sprayed on top of them.
On the head gasket?
Yeah, on the head gasket. It's already going to be treated.
What intake?
Water jackets, yeah, on the water jackets of intake gaskets. Yeah. No, well, now see, the problem with RTV stands for room temperature vulcanizing. That means it gets hard at room temperature. Problem with RTV, it tends to squish out. It only adheres to something that's absolutely immaculately clean. And it tends to get hard, which is a problem, because when things expand, contract, they move around. And the problem is that if you have RTV, or silicone is what most people call it, and you're moving around like this, eventually it quits sticking to this, and then you have a leak. Yeah? The key to the success, now once I've told you that, what do you think the key to the success of 2B is? It never gets hard.
So it expands and contracts.
So it expands and contracts with the parts. Yeah?
Thermostat housing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you see RTV on a thermostat housing, it's done wrong. Guaranteed. In fact, we saw, remember that Dodge Dakota, they did the transmission pan with RTV?
Yeah.
We saw it leak like a son of a bitch, right? Yeah. That's because it's not the right stuff.
Who did that?
So,
Was it broken?
he ghettos. Hell.
Gay class?
Broken will do it the professional way.
I gotta see it again.
No. No. Here's what happened. The construction teacher, right? The construction teacher trades some dude windows because his friend knows how to rebuild transmissions, right? Some guy in Temecula. So, he trades the windows and the installation to this guy. This guy gets this guy to rebuild his transmission. And of course, this guy does a crappy job because after all, he's trying to minimize his costs. So instead of doing a decent job, he does a crappy job. And as a result, he ends up with a transmission that leaks all the time.
And no windows.
Yeah.
Turning us up losing both. I ain't good.
Well, you know how that happens?
Tech ass.
Don't trade.
You know how that happens? I have a house with 50 windows in it. As soon as he said I have a house with 50 windows, I was like,
Just trick someone.
now I know why you're broke. You know how I impressed my friends?
The Permatex?
It was perfect. That's correct.
Other than your good looks, what else?
If your friends are impressed with stuff like that, they're not really your friends. They're not good friends to have. You know how I impress my friends? By being kind and generous and thoughtful and responsible and reliable. Not by borrowing a bunch of money I don't have and hoping things will end up for the best. And that is the problem, going back to something we were talking about earlier, that's the problem with credit cards, Andy, is when you're spending the money, you're sure, oh, something's going to happen, I'm going to just, it'll be easy repaying this, but it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. So, if your plan is to pay off your impulse purchase that you bought on a credit card, you're planning to fail. Credit is for buying houses and maybe a car, not groceries and guitars.
Or love.
Or stereos, that is.
Okay,
So-
you gotta know.
Here's what I want to say to you. So the student that was telling me about all the thousands of dollars he was going to spend on his truck has now changed his mind and just decided that, you know, he's going to just use this as a daily driver because after all, you don't spend a lot of money. I don't spend a lot of money investing in a house on a bad foundation, right?
Oh, damn.
Just like I don't spend a lot of money customizing a vehicle that's got a fundamental serious problem. Yeah? Good. And that's one of the reasons, one of the great advantages of having a class like this, is that we can actually take these cars and we can find out where we really stand with them, right? There you go. You know, and if we take this car, if we put this car up on the rack and we find out that it's got 10,000 leaks, you know, do you really want to fix all those leaks? That could be hundreds of dollars.
I would.
On the other hand, you may put your car up like that Intrepid that Eduardo put up tonight. You go under it, it's got 100,000 miles, and the bottom of it's dry.
That's good.
That's freaking awesome. Yeah. Tell your neighbor, hey, if you ever want to sell this car, let me know first, right? What? I'm serious.
Wait, what's going?
I don't know. Where's Eduardo?
It's his neighbor, she said. His neighbor.
Oh, dang, 10,000 miles?
100,000.
Oh.
But I don't know.
Yeah, but it was dry underneath.
So that's good,
You
right?
know, and you may find out the middle path. You may put your car up like I did yesterday. You may put your car up and find it's got some leaks, and oh well.
So when you want to unload yours? Next week?
Well, the problem is Fords, in my experience, Fords of that era always have leaky power steering. Always.
Why?
Just get used to it.
Oh. I don't think you're Chinese.
So, not the training. Okay, so my suggestion to you is, you know, if you've got an 80s car, run it into the ground and then go buy another. If you got an early 90s, you might be able to have some fun in. If it was okay, where's the best place to buy cars?
Junkyard.
That is incorrect.
Auction. Recycler.
Craigslist.
City impound.
That is incorrect.
Your homies. From your homie.
2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, one more.
Online?
Auction.
Uh-oh. Yeah,
Car
go ahead.
Carmack.
What? E? That's this one right there.
X.
X is incorrect.
GMC.
L is correct. You're missing an E. This, yeah, it's right here. Okay. L.
G?
Jeter.
G is incorrect.
Buy a camel.
I say G.
D is incorrect.
H.
H is incorrect.
Okay.
Hurry up, people. We don't have all night.
P.
S.
S is incorrect.
P.
P is incorrect. You guys suck at this.
A.
E.
Did you chop up a
A. There we go.
And auction.
N is incorrect.
Angels?
What?
Angels?
No.
Oh, that's right. There's
Yeah,
no
pretty
G.
much.
There's no G. There's
Come on, people.
Online?
You know how to play this game? L. That is, we already have it.
I said M.
M. That is incorrect.
A B.
You guys should
B?
go for all the wow.
That is correct.
Even. No.
U is correct.
Abuelos?
Abuelo.
O?
Abuela. That is correct.
What the
The
hell?
best place to buy a car is from your grandma.
Ah, they're in Mexico.
No.
They don't have a
They
car.
have cars in Mexico?
My grandma's
They got better
dead.
cars than we do.
How can I buy?
They have lower unemployment too. You know the unemployment rate in Mexico is like 4%. It's like 50% here.
Okay.
Okay.
Why?
Why is this the best place to buy a car?
Because back then cars didn't break down that much.
Because Abuela's not going to spend all her time racing S10s.
And he's my
Keep his truck out of this.
Also, they tend
Yeah.
to, that means, that's the Spanish for grandmother.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? They tend to take good care of their cars, right?
Yeah,
And
I
they don't overexert on their cars. And you can trust, hopefully, you can trust grandma when she says, well, this is the service I had done to it, right?
Yeah, they
Nah, I
Yeah.
need some
See, because
paperwork.
if you buy a car from me, you don't know
I
if I'm
missed it.
telling the truth or if I even know, right?
So always buy cars
But
from
these
older
are old fashioned though,
Right?
Abuelos are the old fashioned people. I mean, there's.
I bought a
lot of-
65 Malibu SS from my grandmother with 42,000 original miles for $400. Wood.
Whoa.
See, that's
Whoa.
You have
old fashioned years. Dude. Right now,
My grandma's dead. What the hell?
No.
So always get cars from older people.
No.
Yeah, someone you know from church. For instance, old people, they lose their licenses, they can't drive anymore.
Ooh.
Right, anyway, my point was,
Old white people. Old white. No, because they take care of their cars.
So you gotta go, how much
That's
you
true.
want?
What are you trying to say? Mexican stuff.
Don't like Mickey Mouse.
okay, so my point was then, you know, I'm gonna get a low mileage too.
Also soldier.
I don't know. Anyway, the point I was trying to make was that if this car has had like 8 different owners, watch out.
Yeah.
It's like marrying a girl that's had, never mind.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You go there.
That has a mess.
Jet skis and whatever.
I don't even like girls.
Anyways, my point was that Yeah, timing belt is a periodic maintenance item, and unfortunately, it's not going to make your car run any different. So it's kind of depressing to think that you have to spend $300, $400, and it's not going to make your car run any better, but it will keep your car running. So my advice to you is, if you see someone that's got a car that's got 120, 130, 140,000 miles on it, and they want to sell it cheap, but they've never replaced the timing belt, you got to think to yourself, I'm going to have to add in the price of the timing belt on that. Or you could get a Nissan because they have timing chains. What?
Oh yeah, on the timing.
Do timing chains break?
No.
What
Yeah.
do they do?
Stretch.
They stretch, yeah.
You don't change it?
Or they start to make noise. No, not really.
Really?
Okay.
You don't need that.
Yeah, because it's,
That's one of the reasons I got a Nissan when I was shopping for trucks. Because of the timing chain situation.
The recommend those just every time you read those engine, right?
Yeah. Now they do have guides and tensioners and stuff like that that go back, but for the most part, anything that has a timing belt, you're going to have to replace it at regular intervals. And the only way it's going to make a change in performance is to make it run bad if you do it wrong.
Does the Chevrolet have a timing chain?
Depends on the engine.
Maybe the 5.7.
5.7, the old 5.7 had a timing chain, yeah. Yep.
I'm keeping it green.
Yeah. Okay, questions, comments, thoughts on that? We put out a lot of good work this week. In fact, I want to make a special mention of how much I appreciate George going out and getting that part tonight, because that was a potential huge crisis. And I really appreciate it, and I think you understand that next time it's going to be your car, right?
Wait, what do you mean? How could it be my car?
Okay, well, the thing you have to understand is these crises happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
Someone needs parts and they can't go get parts because their car's taken apart. So it's like, you go and make the parts run this time, and next time it'll probably be your car that someone else will make the parts run for, right? Yeah.
Por ti, mañana por mí, right?
Oh no, whose turn is it?
Next time we'll break your sensor.
Lo barato sale caro.
No.
Lo barato sale caro. You know what that means?